Oh, right, we're going to do specifying out how do you actually process the chat message.
Yes.
So that. But then you have stuff on anti-spam.
Yes.
Seems like these are the last two things that are on the pre-written agenda. So. All right, so chat message. Is there
And the red one there, and then the whole bunch here. Just pass this down.
probably the purple one would be best, just because this element is really visible.
Who's that brown? Might be close. Just pick.
Yeah. Okay, so for a client, why the hell is a message? Or why the hell is a chat message?
Well, assuming you have an XMPP stream which has stanzas coming through, you get a stanza type message. Where do you want to start? Like at that level or what?
So I think I missed this discussion. What is the, what level are we sort of going?
Yeah, what is the chat message?
Yeah.
An entry in chat log that the user is currently looking at.
It's, I'm a client, I'm receiving this data, I'm going to have to process it somehow, because I have to be aware of carbons and corrections and what comes standard in the DARPS and 6120 message.
So what data structure is a message?
Sorry?
What data structure is a message?
Basically, what the structure's message, and
What
then
processing order do you have if you're trying to have multiple XCPs? Probably select your corrections versus carbons.
yeah, this is, yeah, if it's just read it, yoink the body out, throw it in a view, okay, we can do that, but once you start doing all these various ZEPs, because we're just going to go straight off of memory here.
Okay.
What I remember having to do, we got to, we got the from, there's technically the type. We've got body, which can be special because you can do multiple languages, which can be also a language. There's a subject. There's a thread. There's a parent thread. That you've got the HTML, that's HTML version with multiple languages, maybe. If we got one I need around, has this been act or not? What's the delay? Which could be by, like, because we could have multiple delays. When was a C requested? Was it received?
Are you trying to go over weakness? That would be hard.
But still, I mean, I'm not even halfway through things I know about.
Well, let's consider thread and parent thread. Almost nobody uses that. Multiple bodies, multiple languages, and multiple HTML and IM elements. I would say some clients implemented it for the sake of implementing it, but in general, on the network, almost nobody does that.
Right.
This is kind of what I meant about compartmentalizing. If we want to start with, like, you start with the basics, and then you can just add on to it if they're interested in these particular tags.
Right.
So I think probably two from type body and maybe subject would be like.
Subject would be optional, I would say.
So and then the first two would just be, that would be the core, like message core, and then build on that.
Right. Okay, so
Two from type body, I think, is
two from
what
type
you
body.
really is like what most logic depends on.
Okay, and type we don't really.
So types, there are presentational reasons. Like if you're using it doing muck, then you kind of sort of need type.
Right.
But you could ignore that and just ignore type and just have the body.
Right. Okay, so
And technically, you don't need the two if a message is coming to you.
well, do you?
Well, if we're
no.
working from the basic
You're
message
fine.
format, have all those there, because then this way, we could extend, all right, fine, you don't need it there all the time. But if you're working from that building block, you need to have it there so you don't have to explain it in every one that needs it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I've seen bugs caused by clients looking at the two, discarding messages. It wasn't exactly what they expected.
right, because it's not necessarily your full JIT. It could be really any JIT. It's just happen to get.
And I believe it's totally optional anyway, from client, from server to client.
Okay.
And body, we are saying body, which I think is good, except this is very much for a I am client use case that we're talking about right now.
Well, this is yeah. Okay. So got these. We care about these. All right.
ID
ID.
is important.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I would say ID is important. We
Almost
could
the
or
first
could
thing
not
we will
want on
do
the
is-
type.
Sorry?
We may or may not want to punt on the type.
The type of the error, that's important.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was what the basics.
Okay. So I'm
Okay.
a client. I receive a message stanza. I extract this. Okay. I can render that. I don't do that. Okay. Cool.
Now, next, as a client, I have a model of my world, which includes a roster of some kind, which has multiple users. Now, when you have a message from is actually both from bare and from full. From bare is what most clients really care about.
Right.
They don't really care about the full bit. So that is a
Unless you're in a mock.
Yes, unless you're in a mock. But in general, you wouldn't. And mock is really a special case. So in that case, given this, now you just get these as events and you put them in a log that you keep in memory, and that's a log per bare JIT of the from.
Okay.
Right?
So
And that applies even for other messages like XHTML IM or anything else.
So we're assuming a parser takes that and breaks it up.
we never received the XML. Something has parsed it into this thing that we were describing.
Okay, yeah.
It could have been ASM1 for all we care at this point. So, okay. That's cool. Carbons shouldn't even exist once we get to this point.
Yes, it isn't in the simple model.
I think regardless of what if you're using carbons or a normal message, you almost don't even have to know the difference.
Yeah.
You just want to dedupe it right away.
Right.
Based on whatever you're doing that. Based
Right.
on ID or message ID, that's it. Whatever that falls to.
So,
Now, these are received messages.
yeah, these are.
You also have sent messages, and what most clients do is, in certain scenarios, they would, like the mock scenario, they would wait for the server to act. But in a normal one-to-one chat scenario, clients would basically just inject that in their local log,
Right.
and then send that over.
Technically true. Well, a lot of clients.
But pretty much all clients do that, right?
Well, yeah, they all do. We start a little further, we want, some act. Yep, we just have 198, we inject it, it's grayed out until that flips, and now it's, a lot of clients do that.
Yeah, so you have in your log, you have a flag next to everything, was this act or not?
Right. I have one, what was it? Time, the delay.
Yep.
So we have time information. Sometimes, which gets annoying.
And you may or may not want to trust it if it comes from the other side. Because then if you're happily having a stream of messages and a message comes in with a delay that says this was 5 years from the past, most clients would just ignore that delay in one-on-one chats, I think. Most clients are purely appending to the log. There is no insertion or deletion.
Okay. So receive a message, there's a delay, that you're going to check if it's from a particular thing.
Well, you can have multiple delay elements as well.
Right.
But most times,
I swear I muted.
but most times in reality, they just use their own local timestamp. That's what ends up happening, right?
Well, if you got a delay, then.
I mean, by default, ignoring the delay.
Oh, no,
all
There is no
times
delay
know-
by default.
By default, delay does not exist.
right.
If there is a
So
delay, then I
if
think
by default doesn't exist, in this example, don't have it. Like you added on earlier, like just like the thing he showed earlier, if we're going through that, you go real basic and then you add stuff on as you go.
This is our real basic.
Yeah.
Now I'm adding on. We're going.
Oh, okay, so you're talking about, I thought we're doing logic start to finish with just that.
And
That's
what more is there for this?
So I would say there's a timestamp included in that most
Okay.
clients include a timestamp as part of their basic structure. This is when I got this message.
Okay, so
then how to start using the basic structure. So when we were talking before lunch, and you said something about what is a message, and I said to a client or to a server. So
fine.
yes, we're talking about clients now, but I've been doing this kind of exercise on the server side because we have 198 support and MAM and stuff, and I'm trying to do the same kind of unification and decide what ties into what and where and how and what our internal API should be, because right now they're all quite distinct and they interact in weird ways. So along that point, so I've been trying to come up with this kind of state machine to use with us. And basically that implies that every message has a state.
Yes.
And so my comment would be, you've got act. I would say that act is a possible state.
Yes.
And in that case, I would add to the list of possible states. Instead of the positive act, say that they've received it, also a negative act, which would be an error message with the same ID of a message that you sent.
So,
So these are kind of tags.
But there are other states as well.
right.
And that's something that a lot of clients don't do.
No.
And
No.
so as an example, if you, and you'll probably be familiar with this, if you send a message to someone anonymously who's using 198 and they disconnect and never resume, we bounce all the messages in the queue with an error.
Because that's
And everyone's complaining. It's like,
Yep.
They say, why can't you just send it to offline storage?
Yep.
That's a whole kind of worms because you might have multiple devices. So Dash actually put together a hack where if you only have one resource,
Yeah.
it will send it to offline storage, but then if you don't, then it still has the old behavior anyway.
Right.
But so people complain about that and they say, well, we have to send it to offline storage because their client doesn't, handle errors and stuff
Right.
in the right way. And they say, well, why can't you just handle it? But my point is that if clients don't handle errors in the right way, there are lots of other kinds of errors that can happen, like delivery failures with S2S, things like that.
Right.
And someone might not even have, someone might be offline, they might have no 198 and no offline storage. And that used to be the case on Java as well. So
Right.
you'd send them a message and they'd be offline, you'd assume it would get stored. But if your client ignored the error reply from memory saying no offline storage, you wouldn't ever know. And a lot of clients are still that way. So
Right.
I definitely want that error state to be a thing.
Okay, so
In any documentation.
states.
Well, error handling is optional, XMPP or otherwise. Most API call return values. Nobody checks for error responses.
Error handling
almost
being
nobody.
bad is a universal
Yes, yes.
It's a programmer thing.
Yeah.
It's just software's non-defining.
Okay, so very basic message.
So just given this, can we implement a bare bones XMPP client that's usable?
Sure.
Right? So we don't really need anything more than this. I mean, maybe the do address if we're also taking into account the sending piece, but that's about it. And as opposed to, I think that's pretty much it from our do. If we had a do, we would have everything required to have a bare bones XMPP client.
Okay, so
Interestingly, just an observation, everything in that list is exactly what man sorts.
Yes.
well, yes.
Except the from is just JIT because it's either the JIT is sending to or the JIT is sending from. Just
Yes.
an observation.
Because in that case,
So this is the list of things for incoming messages. But if you want a data structure that stores any kind of message, then you also
right,
want
so
that from to be a generic JIT. Does that make sense?
yes. And yeah, so having made clients before, that gets really annoying because I now have to search on two fields anytime I want to find, hey, where does this message belong in the related chat views? It's
So you're
It's in the
favor of
field, right?
or you think that's a problem?
it's a complication. Not a big one, but just tiny paper cuts sort of thing of, I now have two indexes that I have to search for to find any messages in a particular conversation.
Yeah,
So,
but if you just have a JIT, then
yeah. So,
but then you have
Yeah,
to store
okay,
whether it's
yeah.
incoming or okay.
problem here.
Well, you do want a flag of some kind, whether this was incoming or outgoing,
Yeah.
because clients display them differently.
Yeah.
We just care about
The other party,
other,
bare JIT. Well, this is contact or something like that.
yeah.
Remote entity, contact, anything like that.
Right.
So that's what this is.
So are we what is that list now? Is it the data structure of a message?
Yes, yes, yeah. This is, again, we got this out of
Yeah.
it's in one stream.
Yeah.
How do we process the other?
Jason.
Yeah.
I'm skipping.
I was trying not to say Jason.
An
But
abstract data structure that maps strings to values.
we parsed off the wire, we're now
Yeah.
working with it. We don't have to have XML structures
Right.
everywhere internally. Okay, so ID, the contact that is with.
You probably need a Boolean incoming versus outgoing. Because that's something
Yeah.
you would display in the UI, whether this was a message that you sent or this was a message that you received.
Cool.
Direction, yes.
Direction. Okay,
I think that's a pretty complete data structure.
Yeah.
MVP data structure.
okay. So this is everything that man gives you with what's configured out of the box.
So with MAM, we store the JIT separately, but because we also store the subset, we use that to determine the direction.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Okay.
otherwise it would definitely be
Do you
direction.
keep this one?
Yeah,
It
we
might be
do.
definitely do, yes.
Okay, so,
So I think this captures NAM. Now the flags and such that you were saying. So there is a log that the client is storing, which is the raw set of events that happened. And then there is the updated state of the client, which where a following message could affect the data structure of a preceding message, right? And that's where your flags, the acts and such come from, the errors come from. The errors don't really exist on their own.
Mhm.
They are interaction between multiple items in the logs. So you have a log, which is your historical set of events that happened, and then you have your state, which is kind of a modified version of that log, where you are going back and modifying messages and such.
yeah,
So you would have a message type error in your log, but in your actual state, you would not necessarily have that. You would have something like a previous message had an ACK fail. So the error would get merged with the preceding message. Just stating that out loud.
Okay, thinking through it, on the receiving end, not much changes
Not much changes.
on the receiving end, it's really the outgoing. Coming in on the receiving side,
Well,
the only thing I can think of
things
would be
do
a correction.
change if you do have, assuming I'm kind of understanding what you're saying, right, things do change in that I may want to, what's it called, message correction and so on.
Yeah, it's the only one I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, message correction is the key one. You have a few that are multi-stage. If you think about, well, file transfer and so on, are kind of we shouldn't even talk about them, but they are like that, and that previous things affect future things or future things affect previous things. In the UI, that you have clients where they add a UI element for a file transfer based on messages, and that keeps getting updated as opposed to every message game. But we can ignore that for the most part. Typing notifications are another where you modify previous things.
Right.
You maintain a typing state for the contact. So the log is multiple typing events that get compressed into the final current typing state.
Right. Before incoming message, this is pretty much.
I think this is complete, yeah.
With correction still to be done. Okay. Outgoing. So I make a message. Have this.
Yes.
I pass it off to send it. Serialize it however on the wire. Off it goes.
So
This is where.
In outgoing, I would say this is complete, except the RFC had complex logic about full chips and bare chips. But in a very simplistic client, this is all I would need. I mean, receive time would obviously be send time or something, but it's just timestamp of the thing. Local time or something like that.
It's like the
Yes.
originating time.
Yeah. Well, for the received messages, it is still your local time, not the origin time. Yes. Yes.
Okay. But for an outgoing one, we do have extra states that we can go through. So first one would be from the start. We are now in potentially an unasked state.
Mhm.
Either it's gone to the muck or 198.
Yep.
We don't know.
Well, you potentially have multiple unacted flags, one for 198, one for message received, and so on. Because then you would need to keep track of all of them.
Well, message received.
The message received.
Oh, so receipts.
Yes. Yeah.
198, unact.
Message receipts and muck also has the special thing of your reflected message. You detect deduping it or something else.
Yes, which we unfortunately didn't make it easy to associate your outgoing one with one that got reflected back.
So.
Huh.
So. You can basically do that with so.
Okay.
Okay.
Errors. Presumably, getting an error will send you through an ACK as well because something received it.
Pretty much. An error, so an ACK is kind of an acknowledgement, but an error could be an explicit error. It could also be something like a timeout on the ACK. That's kind of an indeterminate state. An error is kind of finalizing that, okay, something explicitly happened, as opposed to you still don't know what happened.
Okay. So, goes to unact. I can receive positive error or something that just these aren't IQs, so there really is no for message.
But as a client, most clients keep track of things like this, especially when they're doing ACKs, I think.
I see.
Received clients, for example, would basically kind of show you an error or something with options like retry,
Right.
things like that.
Okay. Yeah, because you're waiting for that app.
And then there is a thing like a disconnect, like a TCP/IP or SSL error, as opposed to an XMPP error, which you may want to just call error as a general thing.
Is it a higher level?
Mm.
I'm not sure.
So then you have TCP disconnects that do happen, and clients need to do something about that.
Yeah, but they don't, the TCP disconnect doesn't necessarily change the message state because of 198. So
If you
could
have,
reconnect
if you
and-
have 198,
So
and with 198 you get a lot of different complex things that can happen.
Yeah,
Reconnects, failing, other things.
so if your message is an act and you get disconnected and you do not resume within the right amount of time, your message is forever an act.
right.
You could assume, kind of just take the concept of a stream and not really worry about 198 versus TCP. They're kind of the same, and just assume that that's a stream error. If a stream error happens, whether that's because 198 couldn't be resumed, you got a complete disconnect, or because the server sent you a stream error, you don't know. Then maybe the message made it through. So that's not a positive failure. That's kind of what we still don't know, but it still failed.
Right.
Somewhat. This is somewhat entertaining.
Yeah. Okay. At this point, I'm bit lost. So what's next?
So I would say we work through, okay, so the messages are coming in. What does the client do when it gets a message of this type? What does the client do to its current state when it gets an error of this type, and so on?
Is this flow incoming or both?
Is it what?
Incoming or outgoing messages or both?
Because right now is outgoing.
So it would be outgoing. Incoming messages you have positively received. Messages you did not receive, you can't really do much about. This is incoming as applies to error messages incoming.
Okay.
Outgoing error messages, when would you send outgoing error messages as a client? You would never do that as a simple client.
I don't think so.
Especially for the body stuff that we're talking about, you would never reject a message by an error.
No, not really.
Yes. Like that pretty much is not going to be a thing.
You might-
Maybe with things like file transfers and such, but let's not worry about
So
that.
that's not chat.
Yes, that's not chat. So in chat, the client would never send an outgoing error. It would always be an incoming error. So other things that can happen, an explicit act can happen. As an event, whether that's 198, which is one act, or it's a receipt that you got from the other end.
They're two different states.
Yeah, which are two different states. And also you have the TCP act.
Let's forget that.
Most clients are not going to.
Most clients are not going to look at that. Most clients do have things though. I don't think any of them are using that for act purposes. I haven't seen that happen.
You could says you'd receive errors if a remote server doesn't store a message for an offline user, I think. So as of now, actually I'm not actually sure what that was in response to, but I will start.
That's a server sending on behalf of the client, but from a client's perspective, that doesn't exist. Because the client themselves would not be sending it.
I can't even tag that over.
I'll try to start keeping an eye on the chat in case it's generating there.
Okay.
Okay, so should we walk through what happens when a specific thing happens? When a specific event happens, what should a client do?
Yeah, let's do that.
So if a message comes in, we already talked about it, the client would just append to its log.
Okay, so see that. And this is a log for contact.
For a contact, yeah, this is a per contact log.
Okay.
I mean, I could see clients implementing a global log and filtering based on contact, but let's not worry about that. It's one contact.
Okay. Ending to log for the contacts. Anything else?
I don't think so. There's not much else the client would do in response to a normal message. Errors, though, are different.
This is just a normal message coming in.
Yep, a
So
normal
we
message
need
to
to
body.
append if we don't already have a message. We have to dedupe there too, right?
So
Because we might
would a
have-
normal client need to do redo?
Well, are we, yeah, I guess, are we,
Like,
we
when
had
would
a
a client
department for this yet or not?
No, I
No
don't know.
departments, no man. This is just bare bones plan.
Again, we're starting a very,
Okay,
very
sorry, yeah,
it's a
basic.
prototype.
You're right.
So,
Yep.
okay, so we're just spinning go. Okay.
Do we, sorry, this is still normal plan, I think, because we're storing origin time, do we append or do we need to potentially reorder?
Well, this is my origin
Yeah,
time.
this is the time
So
that we,
That we received, not the timestamp on this.
we
Okay,
push that. Yeah,
that's
down
on
there.
also, sorry, I saw it up there, but it's different.
Okay, so that's it.
I think so.
Okay. Error comes in.
An error
So
comes in.
this
Yes.
is for normal, maybe even chat.
Yeah.
Whatever. Okay, so
Error being stanza error or string
message
error?
type equals error
Stanza error.
for right now.
Message type equals error. So you would, in this case, what you would do to your state is you would scan for a matching ID
Okay,
and mark that message as having an error.
so right off here, I can tell you we have a problem.
Yep, we have many problems. Oh, go ahead.
At least one. This ID is not unique. Especially since we limited this to one contact. I sent you message 123. You sent me message 123.
Right.
And they are different.
So the only errors you can receive are in response to outgoing messages,
Okay. For matching ID,
where message direction equal outgoing. Yes.
Still we need to store two IDs. Thinking of man down the line.
I mean, that would.
Message errors and MAM IDs are different.
Yes, I
So
agree.
this error ID would have nothing to do with MAM.
Yes,
Well,
the client needs to store both.
It's the,
Well, are we talking about MAM yet? I don't think we are.
not at the moment. We can get there, but. Okay, so this is unique just because of XMPP property.
Well, this is up to the client, as in a client is allowed legally to send the same ID on every single stanza or not send any at all.
Right.
If the client chooses to attach IDs, then it has the ability to do this, otherwise it does not.
Anyway, yeah, property of XMPP that has this issue. So scan for matching ID without going direction. Now we
Flag the message with an error.
We're assuming these are all client generated. Right?
yes.
Yeah, for this they have to be.
So flag message with error.
Now, depending on what the error is, you could do many things. And as in some clients give you the option to retry and other stuff like that.
Okay. And then we begins.
Yeah, that's
This
kind
level
of
of
implementation detail.
Yeah, so that depends on what kind of error you got. Like
Right.
remote server not found is different from not authorized, it's different from other things. So this is potentially you just including the full error as part of the message or something.
But we flagged it as an error, so our UI starts rendering little red
Right, or
exclamation
something.
points beside it. Like,
Yes.
Okay. For this very bare bones, is there anything else?
There isn't. I mean, there are UI considerations like what does the UI do if you get an error for a message that was like 2 days previous? Do you highlight that, surface that, and so on? But I would say that's a UI consideration. That doesn't affect the internal state.
Well, do we want it basically to output to the user, or do we just ignore it?
So in my mind, so I'm thinking like SQL tables and such. Hey,
Right,
in
we're
memory.
taking some internal
Yes.
state that might show UI, might not, but our internals.
Okay.
reflect
If I
this.
want to highlight all errors, if this was being stored in a SQLite database or something, I could do like select all the errors flag set.
Right.
And just display that for that user.
Okay, I get an error message. I search for matching ID. There isn't one.
I would have to ignore. Or I add this to some. a second log where something exists. So this is up to the client. The client may choose to display this in some form. So how about this? The client still appends this to its log, as in it's appending error messages to its log, but it flags them with, yes, this matched something, or no, this did not match something.
Okay, so.
If the client wants to do something with non-matching error messages,
Right, I'm trying
which
to
is
think of,
possible.
which would be possible, you came online, you restarted.
And you got a bunch of errors, you should show them to the app.
From the errors from the
Yes,
last
that's
time you're
fine.
connected because you sent a message to someone and they have one ID enabled and they,
Yes.
whatever, okay.
So even for type error messages, we are actually appending to the log in that scenario.
Okay, so that means there's technically 0.
You can potentially include this in the previous one. The type of a normal chat, you can do /error as well. Everything goes in the log. There are just special flags for normal messages about is an error tied to them. Kind of like a pointer or something.
Okay.
This normal message had this error message tied to it. Or this normal message did not have this error. Or this error message had this normal message tied to it.
Alright, so we always append to a log or contact.
Somebody pointed out on chat, message IDs, I think, already should in the spec.
Yeah.
So what if you have an outgoing message errors, but you have not set an ID?
Outgoing message errors are not a thing, is what we said.
Or if you just sent a message,
Yeah.
it came back with an error,
Yeah.
there was nothing to match it. Ooh,
Yeah,
Well,
don't do that.
then the matching would fail, and we would go do this thing where we
I was just
basically
thinking.
can't match to anything.
okay.
For echoing messages, a client following this is going to set IDs.
Yeah, if the client wants to do
It should
errors,
set IDs.
as part of the outgoing logic, it needs to have IDs by definition. Otherwise, it can't do anything.
If an incoming message comes with no ID, that's perfectly valid as well, but you're not going to receive an error reflected in it.
Okay, so receive an error, we append it to the log, we scan for matching the thing it's associated with, flag that message with the error. If not, we just continue on.
Yep.
Do we need to flag the error that there wasn't a match?
I think so. So in my mind, again, in SQL terms, this is like a reference from the normal message to the error message, and a reference from the error message to a normal message. So you can
so
find one from the other.
okay, from scan. From the flag, match, message with an error. Else we're going to flag the error message
Unmatched.
unmatched with. Okay, so we just received some arbitrary error state that we can't really figure out what the cause was.
So we potentially display to the user because we can't do anything cleverer than that. Now, this gets interesting when you think of UI functionality that a client may provide. Say if I provide a redriver, does that mean I'm adding a completely new thing to the log? Or am I going back and modifying the old thing in the log?
I would prefer to reuse the one that was there because that's, or,
That's what Slack does.
yeah.
So I missed the beginning of that. That's for the incoming error.
I sent a message.
Uh-huh.
It failed to send.
Yeah.
And my UI is displaying, okay, this message failed to send.
Yeah.
I have a redriver from the UI. I click that. Does that modify the existing message? Or does that produce a brand new message? We're saying that it should modify the existing message because that's what I'm operating on.
Or that is still for outgoing, we're talking about incoming, but are we done with the incoming?
I think so. So what we're saying here is that if the incoming thing was an error message, it by definition is modifying an outgoing message.
Right. Okay. So incoming for bare bones, nothing fancy messages is this.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, now let's move on to the
Now we
outgoing. Yeah, I'm just going to move it over to.
Dave also pointed out you can potentially locate the failed message even if there's not an ID, because it also may include the original stanza.
That's
So
very
if
fuzzy
you have a
matching.
copy, yeah, I'm kind of.
Yeah, that's very fuzzy matching. Let's not do that.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
That's always been an optional thing,
Yeah.
that you can include the original stanza. Fuzzly's never done it. I just always thought that was a strange idea.
And if you send 5 messages that are exactly the same, you can't know which one failed.
In my mind, that also should be I don't know why the spec necessarily does that, and then ID should be a must, but.
Right. Yeah, the goal here is if you make something that implements this, you are 100% correct in terms of XMPP implementation,
Yes.
not necessarily every shortcut sort of thing you can do. Okay.
And if you did this, you would have good error handling for the normal case.
Right. Okay, so outgoing.
You can pretty much have stream errors.
So outgoing is the same structure. So we're sending, let's start with the type normal chat. So first thing, what do?
We append to log with a unact flag set.
Into contact log with unact flag set. Now we do have a problem here. I think. Do we need to save an unact field on that structure?
We do, and we potentially need multiple fields depending on which level we're talking about. So a 198 field, and other fields.
So I mean, this is, I'm just going to copy it over here. So I got ID, contact, type, body, time, directions, pretty much are coded on this site, and we do have an act. Okay. So we set that flag.
And then we just send it. That's just assumed that we are sending it.
Right.
And that's it, right? Is there a third step?
I think that may be it until
Yeah,
we get to
that's pretty much
more
it.
complicated stuff. Okay.
Now you have the act. If we're going to include an act, then it needs to be removed from it as well as in some way.
That's right.
So that would basically be you receive an act, whether that's a 198 act or not.
Right.
And you mark a bunch of messages, whatever the act covers, as being act. Depending on the act type, this could be a message received, or this could be a muck reflection, or this could be a 198 act. A 198 act affects multiple messages, others affect only a single message.
Okay, so if we receive an ACK, find the affected messages, unset the unact flag.
Yep. And that's
Do we want a positive ACT or a negative ACT?
I prefer positive
Okay.
or negative. It doesn't really matter. But
So we're going to add, has this been ACT? Yes. We're going to set the ACT flag
act equal false, act equal true.
with ACT flag inside. Yes. Okay.
And is there anything else then?
Meaning of this is we don't know about this yet. Because we haven't gotten to 198.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's outgoing, which will kick us over to this one if we got an error back.
Yes.
Which, if we got an error back and we found a message, would also be an ACK.
So if you're sending a message and you get an error for it, it's by default is
The server received
maybe
it.
at
Maybe.
the server did receive it, yes. The server did receive it.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Based on. Okay, so if we went through all the error types, we could
Yeah.
make them. Okay. Okay, so and that means those structures are pickable.
Yep.
Okay, so we got the act. Now I do know like one thing's the RC, and especially with the delay field. Nothing really special that we have to do, just save it, right?
I think so. I think we just save the delayed field because as far as I am aware, most clients, if they get a delayed field on a message, do not resort their log.
I did.
You're one of the few who did. Most don't. Most purely do an append in the UI. Most don't even have a login memory. They just append to the UI. And that may or may not be correct. That may be correct in that you wouldn't normally expect messages to come out of order. And if you do, it's questionable whether you can trust that order that the messages are coming from.
Right.
And the delay thing can also come from multiple entities.
Yeah,
Which complicates things. Do you even have guidelines on that? That if you get a delay in a message, what do you do with it as a client? Do you trust it? Depending on which hop it's coming from, are you supposed to reorder or anything? I don't think we have any guidelines anywhere around that. People just do whatever feels best, which is most of them go for the simple append-only approach.
Right. Okay, so just save it, option, and we can restore.
I think the only thing that's done with it is display the timestamp in the UI potentially, and delayed messages are rendered with a different color.
Right, I'm thinking in Swift, the only time they put a timestamp really on there is if they have the delay stamp on it.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's you just sent it right now, or
Right.
received it right now.
In Mac, I want to reply to that. Well, it is the way of determining historical messages.
So I think, so as a simple client, is delay useful? If you're writing a simple client, will you do anything with delay?
Frankly,
It's nice to have, but not essential.
the main thing that it would tell me is stuff that was said while I was not around, because otherwise it wouldn't have delay on it at all.
And that's when you get into basically either MAM or some sort of sync or offline messages,
Right.
which you can pretty much assume would always be in order. I don't think any of the implementations or ZEPs even consider out of order things.
Yeah, at this moment, delay stuff isn't that big of a deal. It does become a big deal when we have message correction. Because if you got a message correction that was delayed, when was the message edited?
Right. Yeah.
That's really.
What is, so yeah, as far as I know, nothing really actually uses delayed, and like we said, there's no real guidelines. Is that a candidate for removal in future RFCs, or is there some like critical?
Well, there's good usage you could put it to, nobody does though.
Okay, so if nobody's using it, is that potentially something
Well,
that can be thrown away and maybe you write an XCP
So
if you need it?
it is being used in, especially in Mock. And is anything which has a message archive that you can query.
Yeah.
Would want a timestamp attached, which is over delay element.
Yeah.
Right.
Because man uses that to show you know exactly when things are sent.
And I think Rusty takes it in 198 if you resume
That makes sense.
the stanzas have been held for like however long you've been offline, and you log in and you get them all at once and they'll all appear with the same timestamp unless you obey the delay.
Right, that makes more sense. Which
So So you store a delayed timestamp?
So my proposal would be that my origin time just becomes timestamp, and every message is a timestamp. If it has a delay, use that. If it doesn't have a delay, use the current time.
Okay, so yeah, we're introducing delay. So that's for the errors. If there's a delay.
Well, which delay? If you have multiple delays, what do you do?
If delay from trusted source, which would be,
What would that be defined as?
do you set a by on your delays?
I believe so.
Okay, so if the by,
So
and
by
you,
is the thing that's underspecified right now.
yes, do you strip out delays from?
I don't think so.
So you can't trust them anymore, man. So you would, well, if delays were trustworthy, you would take the delay that is from the party that's the most on the other side.
When you say trustworthy, remember like everything else in the stanza is also coming from the person who sent the stanza. So
So in general, in
if they want to
XMPP,
trick you into thinking it came from a different time, like they can. I don't know. They're putting stuff in the body. Do you trust the body?
Right.
so,
Think
but,
of how
so,
we've done this
so
before.
if we have a delay on it, what would you use it for?
The client's like timestamp,
So this is
but
purely,
not the order.
so this is purely presentational.
So
and
I would
we
open
don't-
clients today. Do
Okay. Okay, so we have orders separately from
Yes.
timestamp, which could derive from delay. And if you had multiple delays, what you would want to display is when the opposite party sent it, not when your server held it or not held it. So you don't want the delay of that your server adds, you want the delay that the
So
other entity on the other side, the other pulpit added, right?
yes, I know what you're saying, but I have always considered. So we could in XMPP timestamp every message, but I've always considered it an optimization that we just assume if you receive a message with no delay, it was sent reasonably recently
Right.
and enough that we don't care about setting a timestamp. So delay.
Using that first chronological delay always, or this
So-
delay.
So I would say if we had multiple delays, we would want to, in the UI, display the oldest one, because that's the closest to when the message was sent.
That
Yeah,
sounds like
right.
consensus.
Okay, so if delay,
If I had to show something in the UI, I would want to show the oldest. From a storage perspective, we may or may not want to store multiple delays, but let's not complicate things. Let's assume we're just storing one timestamp, and that timestamp is the oldest delay or the current time. Yes. Dave says first chronological delay, i.e. earliest.
okay, so we set the origin time to the oldest of the current time and any of the delays. Okay.
I think so.
Okay. That's pretty nice. Okay. So, is there any information we need to keep about the fact that it was delayed? I know Mux usually kind of color code, and instance Swift color code the historical messages.
Well, let's have a was delayed flag. If the time was derived from a delay element, then it was delayed, otherwise it was not. Mux UIs are pretty dumb in that if you have a delay element, they display them differently, even if they should not. As in, we did experiments with adding delays to every message.
Right.
Because every message should have a timestamp.
Right.
But that does not work in UIs very well.
So,
As in, clients do things like show notifications based on if there's no delay, then they would show that toast and so on. If there's a delay element, then they won't.
I see.
So because they assume that a delay means there's some sort of history
Right.
and other fun things like that.
So we're implementing a client, doing data storage, we're trying to do things in a very correct way. Does the distinction of the message was delayed or not make sense in this context? Even if it was for a month, like, do we actually, outside of XMPP clients and Swift and maybe some others, like Slack, which however, I've never seen, I join the room and these messages are colored differently just because they were already there.
So delay does not matter. I think last read and such.
Sorry?
Last read, or what's the zip called? I read a bunch of
Okay.
Markers?
yes, chat markers.
Okay.
Those matter. Delay, I don't think does.
Okay, so, okay, keep this. Next feature that we can tack on. So we just brought up last message correction. So, incoming. I receive.
In event of type last message correction.
Yeah, so this is error, this is. And I probably should have moved this to 4 because I don't know if the camera can pick up. No, it can't pick up. It doesn't. Okay,
How does everyone like the writing?
I am hoping that someone could.
There are lots of comments in the chat room about why you're writing in Arabic.
Or backwards.
Or backwards.
To be fair, when the first comment came, it was actually flipped the video.
Right. Okay, so receive a last message correction, which means, do we append it to the log?
So it's a last message correction. Now, multiple things can happen. It's very similar to errors in that it affects a previous message. So you scan for a previous message,
So,
which may or may not exist.
so we append it to the log, we scan for the matching.
Yeah, you append it to the log. I think everything should be appended to the log when you don't necessarily render based on it. So you wouldn't want to render this.
Okay, so scan for matching. And we do the same if matched.
If matched, update old message or attach to old message or something.
Okay. So data matched message. And then we set a match file on this one, which means technically we need
I mean,
match field.
yeah, you potentially have multiple different message types or classes. If you
Types of matches, sure. But we're going to set it for message correction.
Mhm.
If
If not matched.
and if not, set. Indicate that it's not matched.
Was that, so I stepped out, but Tobias said in the chat with last message correction, you probably want to keep old messages so that you can show editing history in the UI.
Yeah.
So, and I definitely agree if that was
Okay.
something we said, I wouldn't want to rewrite history ever.
So when we say update the match message,
We're just linking.
we
Let's
are,
assume we're always linking and never overwriting.
Never, so yeah, history always remains.
okay, so for our structure, we do have
So now when
previous
I,
versions.
so now when I, as a client, want to render this log, I can't just
Or
open
new
one
versions.
message. I have to look at the message and all messages following in case it was modified.
Well, as I said, we should separate out the log as it actually happened, the series of events, from the current state. The current state gets updated, and current state is what you render, but the log may have had multiple events mapping to a single current state.
Correct. So am I storing new versions or previous versions?
I would say that in the log, you're always storing the every event that you're getting unmodified,
Right.
but as you're updating your internal state and such, you will update the old messages in that internal state.
Right, okay.
Potentially storing multiple versions, older versions is one way of doing it. Which, so
Process updating, I take this body, stick it over, take the edited one, stick it right there. So I can store
So
multiple versions of bodies.
one version of doing that is if you have one message, if you have 3 versions per message.
Message. Okay.
I think so.
That sounds right.
I think that sounds right. So the stream dropped. So just for the people who are on the stream, we were just saying that we tag messages which have been corrected as having been corrected, so they cannot be displayed in the UI if the client chooses. And Dave says, by the way, that you have shrunk.
Yes. Shrunk. It will all just grab the color.
Yeah. And any message correction is linked to the previous message, right? Through a link reference or something.
Right. Technically, that means there's only ever one previous version. You just walk the chain back if you want to grab them all. Okay.
That's one implementation, obviously, but that's a very simple implementation.
Yeah. Given this, I don't think you could possibly correct a message multiple times.
Well, the nice thing about this one is we haven't actually said, we kept it generic that if in the future there was a ZEP which was not just last message correction, but any message correction, this just works.
Okay, good. Okay, and if there was no match, then there's nothing to do. So, okay.
Now, this has very interesting, so this was for incoming, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I think this seems complete. There's not much else you can do.
Right.
Outgoing is more interesting.
Outgoing is more interesting. Now, we are specifying that in our implementation, in our guidelines here, we're setting IDs. So,
The interesting thing with outgoing is error handling. If you get an error in response to a correction that you do, what happens?
oh boy.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Most clients would basically just assume, not ignore that case.
Okay, so first, if we're going to send last message correction, we're sending it.
We will basically do exactly the same.
We append.
And the correction itself would have an
so we
ACT
appended.
and an error flag or something. So like normal messages, we had ACT flags on them,
right?
And we had a potentially error flag or something on them as well, or an error message tied to them.
Right.
We would have the same for corrections because they are just messages.
Right. Yeah, because your correction needs to be, and so the error handling is correct. But if we were sending a last message correction, we have to find the previous message we are correcting.
Mm-hmm.
So
there will be a previous ID.
Find. Find previous message. Set the corrected flag and set our previous version to the found message. So basically the same thing over there, but
Exactly the same variable over here.
we send it out. We're going to wait for the ACTs. Our display timestamp is going to now be this version.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're good. We have a nice little XMPP client that does ACTs and last message correction.
ACTs, last message correction, handles errors.
Handles errors. Can we do anything better in terms of error handling? I think it's doing all the right things.
Unless you wanted to go through the specific error cases and change UI based on that.
Which we don't really.
We don't really care. The only thing is thinking, we still have receipts.
So for receipts, what would we do?
So first thing for receipts is we have to stamp that we want to receipt.
in the outgoing case.
Right.
And in the incoming case, we get a receipt, we match, and we mark as having been received.
By a list of potential contacts.
Those potential contacts.
Okay, so that means on this we have received by list of receipts, and we also have a request receipt flag, just to know that.
Yeah, received by would be a multi-valued thing,
Yeah, it's an array.
or a set. But yeah,
Or
yeah.
it's technically a set.
So now there are a couple of questions of what a good client should do. So assuming that a client is requesting receipts, if it gets a receipt from a party it was not expecting, it should just ignore it.
Should.
Well, if as a client I send,
Yeah, the client, so this might be taking your words a little too literally, but the client should never be expecting anyone to receive its message. The server, more or less, right there, theoretically the recommendation should be you send to the bare jail, and the server decides who gets that message. You don't get it because you're, I don't know, have some state set that we think you're gonna don't get it, and you do,
Right.
these 3 places do get it. So you just get received by, and it's just an indication that these people, like I don't think you ever want to say, well, I wasn't expecting them to get it, so I should show an error or something.
so let's hold on. So we have act and we have received. Are we talking about message receipts? Deactivates that message receipts. Okay.
So that's always the
Seems to be
information.
an wire implementation for making this work.
Right. So and this would be separate from muck reflection, which is kind of
Yes.
receipts.
Technically, you sent a receipt request to.
Because you could have
this
both
would fill out.
You could have both with muck, as in multiple muck participants may respond with the receipt.
Yes.
Okay. So this would fill up. So this would fill up in the. So this receipt is actually pretty much logically enhancing the old message,
Right.
enriching the old message, and then it doesn't necessarily itself be needed to add it to be added to the log. Maybe you add a timestamp received by at this time as part of that message, but the receipt on its own, in theory, you could argue that it would be useful to have that in the log, but
I'll just go into the log.
well, yeah, let's go all the way into the log and we add a reference to it. So when you say received by, that should be that that thing is pointing to the receipt message. Right?
Okay.
So you always are purely just referencing. So given any message, you can see all the receipts
So
through a simple query.
in that case, let's just change these 2 receipts. So we have
The list of receipts received for that.
Yeah. So
For
we
that
have one
client.
previous version, and we have the set of receipts, which points to those. So,
Yes. And the receipts potentially point back to the message. So that's something we can just do as a standard thing, as in if there is a message that references a previous message, you always have back references and forward references, and you're good.
Right.
In all cases, message correction, errors, all of that.
Okay.
I'm forgetting. So did last message correction also allow you to edit other stuff in the stanza?
Yes,
I
it
think so.
replaces the entire.
It allows you to do everything.
Yeah, I think it just gives you you should not edit.
Okay.
Yeah, don't
You're not-
change the semantics of it.
I hope you're not allowed to change error messages. Are you?
Well,
I think there's anything explicitly.
Let's assume that that's not the case. Let's reject that because that will be interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
I would say that changing the error type is
Yeah.
changing the semantics and purpose of the message, which would be rejected.
Yes.
But does that include someone asks me a question and then I say yes, and I edit it, say no, is that going, my client shouldn't let me do that, it's changing.
So can I correct a receipt? That's a normal message.
I think there's a lot of cases.
The whole thing is you can't change the semantics of the.
Well, we should
Purpose.
specify that, because if someone is following that, we should say that this error message or this receipt message can only apply, the magic logic can only apply to normal messages. Is that what we're saying? If I'm a developer and I'm looking at these instructions, what should I get away from it? If I get this kind of interaction.
To do that sort of checking, it would have to be the message could only include a receipt. Like sending a receipt that also had a body attached to it.
So does last message direction actually require a body? If I recall, message receipts basically had an ID. Can I just change the ID as part of the direction? Hey, I was receiving this message.
What does 308 say?
Yeah, let me pull that up. I completely forgot where it's set. We can just ask Dave. He'll let us know.
Last message direction, business rules. Okay, so sender must not include a correction for a message with non-messaging payloads, non-messaging be stuff that does not include a body.
Dave says that if you really try, you might be able to write smaller.
Okay.
So
Just
if you write angle brackets font size equals larger, so angle brackets at the top.
Just press the zoom button. So just press the zoom button. Making Dave happy. But no, you should probably get a picture of this and start.
Yeah.
transcribing. So if someone else wants to go to the whiteboard, I'll copy down mine.
I've tried to track the logic as best I can.
Okay. Awesome.
On the notes, but there may be some broken spots because we would like go back and correct something, and I lost a little bit.
Okay.
Do we want to try to transcribe this into a sequence diagram or something instead of big long text?
It'd be a lot easier to follow.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Are we happy with the logic?
up to receipts, except for your mess that you just brought up. Yes.
You're welcome. I mean, it's not my fault. I didn't write this out.
Okay. So let me just.
The sender must not include corrections for non-messaging payloads. Let's see if non-messaging is defined. It doesn't seem to be through a quick search. So in our case, the only messaging payload is the body.
Yes.
So this is pretty much, you can only modify the body.
For this model, yes.
Okay. We may or may not want to define certain rules about how do you detect what the message type is. As in, if a message contains a body and a receipt, what do you do?
Yeah. That's.
I guess nothing explicitly talks about that, but
So I would say you could treat those as two separate events that just happen to come together.
yeah, because that would also that would kind of be nice in general. If you're, say, a mobile client and you're matching up several things before you do a flush, you could potentially.
Oh, well, maybe not, because you can.
Instances in the same difference.
We had a ZEP about this, right?
That message profiles. So what we're talking about. They basically said you shouldn't put stuff unrelated in.
Yeah, no, you're right. That kind of breaks the stanza abstraction. You probably.
But if you get it as a client, there should be something that you should do.
Yeah.
Which is either pick this or pick that or pick all or something.
So,
So that's the only
Say if there's a
thing I
body,
see.
just pick the body. That seems like the most.
I think body should override everything else.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. And we don't have weird, we don't officially support it, but we have this clients are so generic that some of them do one thing.
Yeah, and
support them.
yeah, I think just pick one is the simplest thing to do, and I don't think anyone today out in the wild is sending weird things like
That's
that.
not likely to happen anyways, so, right. So once you get that typed up, right, let's erase, and if you're okay with kind of going through it all again, throw it out as a,
just like, I'll take a picture
oh, that works, yeah.
and then you can erase it.
Cool. I'll start drawing it out as a diagram instead.
We'll take a picture as well. Lots of wonderful handwriting.
This is why we use email and not written correspondence. Yeah.
Got it. Is that readable? Make sure we don't. Always.
Lance, are you typing it in?
I am taking, yes.
ZEP 226.
Is it 226? Message stanza profiles. Which is deferred?
Okay. So where did we start? It was incoming messages, right?
Yes. So, incoming message, probably want to start a little bit higher.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's one of the mistakes that I made. So incoming, we append to the log for the contact.
It goes. I don't even know what that first box was mixing metaphors here. Message. Pencil.
Yeah, the message stanza profile stuff is good.
Okay,
Good job, Peter and Justin.
and after that, we're going to start looking for particular message types. So the first type that we're going to be looking for is if it is an error.
Type error.
You also had set origin time, the current time, or any delay time. Where would that fit in that logic?
Okay, true.
So that's probably first.
Append to the log and then set the origin time to the oldest.
Could maybe just call it timestamp. That's
Or
what
set-
most
yeah,
systems call it.
that's true. Set the timestamp. Set the time to.
Oldest delay
Or the current time.
or now.
Is that this one, man? It's pretty good. I wonder if we can use that for this.
And then we want to do message type checking.
It's not
Is that
necessarily
all,
a type
like,
field,
level
but if the type is error,
Sure.
then we're going to search for a
Upgrade for the
message
second
with
feature.
matching ID that was outgoing.
That updates.
Then we search for,
If,
so I said again, if type was error, we search for message ID that was outgoing.
yeah, so search for a matching, that's why pseudocode might be,
I think
That's-
pseudocode might be best for this.
So,
The nice thing about pseudocode is we can write it in a collaborative fashion as well.
right, so, let's,
I feel like the,
Okay.
up to you guys.
It's fine, if we can make this work, then it's fine.
let's keep going. Okay, so we're doing the other matching tonight.
Matching,
You're looking at,
search for matching ID. If ID exists, we
Flag with error.
show, flag
So-
message or something.
so we flag the one that we found.
If it,
It's not, they're going to flag the error message that it was unmatched.
flag. Flag is unmatched. Cool. That's the whole error flow, right?
And if the error was something that we could consider an ACK, we would set the ACK flag.
Oh, okay.
And that's if the previous message existed.
If it exists, flag the message. Then flag message as
As the error had an error.
and then and then just flag as
If the error was something we can consider to be an ACK, it might not be. Until we actually go through all the error conditions and determine. Okay, so then the next soil thing that we're checking for is
next time.
those are going to be doing the message correction. So if the message has, I don't remember what it calls it, was it replace ID?
This is for chat and normal, is that what we said?
Yeah, we can't check on
the message correction was whatever it was called, if correction. So we appended to the log. Next, we basically checked if there was a match message.
Right,
So let's just do if search matching ID, same as above.
right. But for the condition there, it's just say if it was a LMC.
If correction, so we have the message profile, standalone profile step, which basically specifies things like this. It doesn't include this step, but it would be if type is correction. Okay, I think we'll go through exactly how the types are
Okay.
detected later.
Okay, so
Which
these are
order we do
not,
things
these are
on and so
not the types in the stanza. This is,
Okay.
okay, so
Yes.
if correction.
Okay, so that's if.
Yeah, these are the profiles, if you will, as opposed to the message type attribute. Because I think that's what logically makes more sense
Yeah.
as an implementer.
Yeah,
If type error, I want to call that something other than type because that's.
if profile.
If profile, sure. It's error or if it's a,
Correction or LMC.
let's see.
Then we're going to search for the matching.
Search for matching ID, same as above. Technically, this is not a sequence diagram, but that's okay.
Yeah, and it's not, it turned into
It's a flow chart.
chart.
which is still good.
Yeah, which is fine.
So find matching ID. And then if it exists,
This spell. Okay, so if it exists.
then we're going to flag the matching message as corrected.
And make a dot file out of it. There we go.
And then we're going to set the previous version of our LMC message to the message that we found.
Previous version.
Incoming message dot previous version equals found message.
Yeah, okay. Previous message on LMC to found message. Okay, I'm just kind of good.
Okay, and then the next one, which we didn't finish getting written down for this little filter thing, is if it's a receipt.
What if if no
If it not-
message
it doesn't
exists,
It doesn't do it.
don't care, no error, just ignore it.
It's just
Sandbox, you can create some
done.
rows.
Or
I guess such as my
that's a client decision. Ignore or error.
No, don't even want the error. Like if you got a correction for something that didn't exist, it's still a message you want to display. So that whole non-exist branch we can get rid of.
Well, yeah, so just ignore it,
Yeah, just
drop it, don't care, yeah.
I mean, still appended it to the log. We still want to render it, which is we're done.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
it's
render it,
available.
we're gonna render it as a normal message.
Yeah,
You can flag it as unmatched or something.
yeah, flag as unmatched. So the next type that we're checking is if it was a receipt. And then we search for a matching ID.
Yeah.
This should be very.
It exists. If it
It
does not
exists.
exist. It's very logical. It's
Matching ID.
It's just one where I just want to check and search for matching ID no matter what it is.
yeah. So
It's almost easy to reverse the two if you want to change the logic.
So if it exists,
That actually does seem reasonable, because no matter what. you
I think it does. So you have this specific type of message which has a message ID for previous message, which could be a receipt, or it could be last message correction, or it could be something else. And you pretty much always search for the last one, and you pretty much want to link to the last one from this one, so add a reference to this and a reference forward as well. And that basically gives you all of this. And a flag is basically essentially, does a reference exist to the previous one?
For that particular
Yes.
profile.
So is the reference null or not?
Yeah.
Is basically the flag.
Flag
So-
is-
okay,
So that logically kind of unifies these.
that's almost, but the message corrections, you only want to give the one. Receipts, you could have a set.
Message corrections, you could have a set as well. There's nothing wrong with having a set.
But you only,
You can, well, currently message correction is artificially limited to just one previous message.
right, but then you
Logically-
edit it,
Hmm?
and then you edit your edit. After you edit?
Well, you have two options. Either you have a set or you have a linked list. Right?
Right.
Going back through history, and they're pretty much equivalent. As in, a
They're
linked list
equivalent for the corrections, not for receipts.
in receipts. So if you had, yeah. Not for receipts, yeah.
It's like, yeah, they are so similar. It
They're so similar.
It feels like it should, but for now,
Yeah.
let's keep it.
Yeah, okay, let's keep them separate now.
I mean, each of these are gonna be like 5 lines of code.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I
so-
think this is fine. Let's not overcomplicate it.
Okay, so receipt, if the match exists, we're going to update the match, or the match that we found, its receipts set needs to be updated to include the receipt that we have. Too many repeated words. And the receipt message that we have.
Sorry, I tried to do 2 things at once. I didn't even hear that first part.
Okay, so
I should not write it.
yeah.
Listen then.
So if the match exists, the matching stanza, we're going to append our receipt to its set of receipts.
Add a link to receipt.
Yeah.
Can just be the item. So you add link to receipt, and otherwise you don't. If it doesn't exist, then link is just null, or you do nothing essentially.
Yeah, that maybe renders or does something, we don't know.
So you add link to receipt, and you also add a reverse link as well as part of it.
See,
Link receipt to message. So you link receipt to message and add link to the receipt to the message.
link,
So
bidirectional.
bidirectional links.
Except that the original message has the set that you want to use.
The original message has
So-
multiple links because multiple can link back to it.
Okay.
And if it does not exist, we
Mark as unmatched.
Well, that's fine because that basically means the link, it never got linked, so link is null.
Okay.
So something like link remains null or something along those lines.
yeah, there's nothing to do.
I mean, you can add it as a
Just
flag.
ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Just- Drop it on the floor, we don't care.
Well, just all the others, the error and message corrections we marked as unmatched.
So let's just mark it.
Mark is unmatched, all right.
Yeah, mark isn't matched. However, we mark it as a implementation, but something indicates that it's unmatched.
Mark's unmatched.
Okay, that was everything for processing incoming messages. Cool. So get a picture of that. Is that one?
Good to go.
Alrighty.
Are you doing it? Matt's turning it into a more digital diagram as well.
Okay.
Cool.
Now the outgoing was help. We append to contact, flag it as
Unact, I think.
unact, well, the act flag is false.
Exact flag is false.
Send a message.
What do we?
We append to the contact log. Because that's what we always do.
Flag set.
Yeah.
To contact log.
And then we're going to check, are we sending out a message correction?
If
So the type that we're sending is a message, LMC.
Profile, which we'll have to write down a definition for, just to make it clear that it's not type, right? It stands for type. If the type is LMC.
Then we're going to do pretty much the exact same thing we did when receiving, is we're going to find a previous, mark it as corrected, and set the previous version to, or mark the old one as corrected. And the one that we are sending, we're going to set as previous version to the thing that we found.
Old one as corrected.
Old is corrected, new is previous version is set to match.
The delink. See that?
Yeah.
And then, and mark, yeah, mark as matched. If it does not exist, what did we even do?
It doesn't exist, that this is a state that should not happen, like we are sending this message.
Yeah,
They're
that's
creating it.
right. So that's
The client is buggy per se.
It's a bug in that case.
sure. So we can assert exists.
Yeah. Like, yeah. The whole process actually would have been finding the previous version first and then passing that through whatever we were doing. But
Yeah, that makes sense.
okay. If we are sending a receipt, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah, we don't have to do anything.
Don't do anything with the
Yeah.
receipt.
We're appending to the log anyway, so we don't actually do anything.
Right. We're a client, we don't send errors. So
We don't send errors. The only thing we're doing that's not here is we are attaching it, linking it to. Does that already?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So we're just linking it.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah.
That's all we have to say. Oh, yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Oh, well, no, yeah, normal message append the log is first, so there's no reason to say message. These are just received message are just done.
And message receipts are pretty much instant. So there would be so receipts could have things like acts. Like you send a receipt, but does Z98 acts and so on, 198 acts and such. I don't know if we want to include those or not.
That's sort of covered in that's now the incoming logic again, right? So we
Yeah,
don't need to
that's
actually add it.
something we should have added to the incoming diagram that you had, is if it's an ACK. It's a
Oh, yeah.
wireless ACK. Somehow find any affected messages and mark them as ACK. So Kev, what we are doing is running through creating like the implementation guideline. If we're doing a client that's just doing messages, how should we implement it so that we have something that we can give to new developers so they can actually make XMPP clients and do it in a proper way that is correct. And hopefully not as buggy as things that we've seen in the past. So
proper error handling.
proper handling, handling
Acknowledgement
receipts, message corrections. Yes, this is the tail end of the diagrams. There's a picture, I've got a picture of the diagram that was just up.
I have a picture.
Okay,
He's got one, I got one. Yeah.
I'm sure we could,
Throw those up on Imgur somewhere in the room.
yeah.
Wherever you prefer. Yeah, so this one was just sending outgoing messages, which turn out to be much simpler.
Yeah. So did we ever so for incoming messages? Did we add things like act them? Or is that we're not that far yet?
We should add to the
Yeah, I guess
line to that diagram of if it's an ACK profile, whatever that ends up being.
If the message is ACKable, ACK in. Yeah. And if the ACK has a delivery failure.
So Kev, we're talking about this profile thing. So we're not talking necessarily about the type that's stamped on a stanza, but Is it a message correction? Was it a receipt? Is it just a plain chat?
Yeah, and the ZEP is 226.
Yeah.
Message standard profiles.
Or that's a,
I didn't realize that was an actual thing.
Yeah, it's an actual
I just thought this was a.
It's an actual ZEP. It doesn't actually include things like corrections and such because they're too new, and the ZEP is pretty old. But this is essentially the logic it goes through, that a stanza can have multiple profiles, and they apply an order. This is the priority order in which you check for different profiles.
yeah, so, yeah, we're using that ZEP kind of as a general idea of what we would do here. So the stuff that we're operating on, again, are not the actual XML stanzas that come off the wire, but like the internal object representation of those, which we can mark with what type of theme was it, a correction received, etc.
This is almost a message subtype.
Basically, yeah. Not on the wire, just internal, your view of what the hell was this thing I just received.
How do you interpret this?
Right. Okay, so basic chats with error handling, with ACKs, ACKs from the server, some source server, not client. Message correction and receipts. That is, we're assuming that carbons are handled below this, so we just, okay. This also works in muck, same model.
This works in muck, except there may, I mean, if a muck reflection can just be assumed to be an ACK, which, and the logic is muck specific, but this just works.
Okay.
Muck, we need to know, we may need to distinguish between private and private chat.
So the definition of contact is interesting in that. So from a client's perspective, now let's talk a bit about that. So a contact is a bare-JIT normally. There are full-JIT interesting things that happen. You select a specific full-JIT depending on what the RFC says.
Right.
But for the most part, in the UI and such, logically, it is a bare-JIT. Except in the muck case, in which case it's a full, you have subcontacts as well. Both for muck and non-muck cases, you have subcontacts. UI may be different. Now, the way I've done this in the past and seen this done in the past, there is a Lance contact for normal chat, and then there's a separate Lance contact for group chat messages, which is how many clients do private versus non-private messages.
Right.
So group chat messages almost are a completely different profile, or completely different layer.
What's that if profile mean?
So we're basically saying that this ZEP, which one is it? 226 message stanza profiles. And then how do you interpret a given message? Is it a normal message? Is it a receipt? Is there something else?
Yeah, that's really old. It'd have to be updated, but not
It would need to be
necessarily
updated separate.
in your code. You're about to do
You would need to.
things that it's talking about.
Yeah, so it basically says a single profile applies to each message. As a single message is not in two or more profiles. So you basically interpret it as one thing.
But if profile is that a yes or no question?
This is a select, it's kind of a switch case.
So if
That should be
profile is
yeah.
LNC, else.
Yeah, I don't remember how to draw flowcharts. Probably very well.
Okay.
I think we have a basic logical structure here.
So stuff like references, we just carry along like we do the body.
I think so.
And that's,
So
take care of the rest, yeah?
yeah, so body, XHTML, IAM, references, these are basically just what's it called, message type payload or whatever the word was.
It's just stuff that for now we are
Messaging
considering
content. Mm-hmm.
as part of some abstract body.
Yeah, I think, you know, 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 I think, you
I think that references are an IM profile, yeah.
Okay. So that's the messaging model in XMPP.
I think that's the messaging model in XMPP now. Does presence affect this at all?
Have you done the hard part?
Which part's the hard part, Kev?
The hard part is how you deal with receipts.
Sorry?
The hard part is how you deal with receipts.
Yes, we just did receipts.
Cool. That was while I was going downstairs to find a webcam, was it?
Yeah. So the receipts, we find.
Well, we went into the hard part, like last minute correction for receipts and such. We basically said that's not allowed.
Oh, right.
Given that receipts don't actually, you are not supposed to modify non-messaging payloads.
Right. Yes, we have receipts handled.
I think the hard part about receipts is how you show them in the UI.
That is true. So what the model we have will give you is, given a message, we can give you the set of receipts that were received for that message,
And given
which
a
you can
receipt-
render however you want.
Yeah, and given a receipt, which message it applied to. Rendering, maybe consider off topic.
Rendering,
Well, I think the rendering is kind of important. I generally think it's off topic for specs, but in this case, the semantics determine the rendering to a certain extent. So what we used to do in Swift was that we considered that asking for message receipts was something that you did if you were a person who really cared about knowing the message got there, because you were in the sort of environment where it was important to know the message got there, rather than chatting to Auntie Mabel about birthday ideas or something.
right.
And so we did it so that if you enable receipts, it would actively show you a warning icon until the receipt was received.
Yes.
I think it's a really horrible UI, and I've now decided it was entirely the wrong thing for us to do. But if we're doing the how to implement an IM client with XMPP, it's a sensible sort of thing for us to mention, I think, because there's two distinct ways of looking at it. There's the you should warn that that an app hasn't come back, a receipt hasn't come back rather, and there's the more typical modern IM client, which is you just don't show anything until there is a receipt. I think a line about that is probably worthwhile.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I think 198 acts do the opposite thing. I think 198 acts you actively show when they haven't been act.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Actively
sense.
show it? Sorry.
Sorry, I missed what you said, Sam.
I said you actively show it?
Oh, yes, very, very good. I'm so glad I jumped into the call now. But at least for Swift, the model I think we're going to go with is 198, possibly with a slight delay, because there's always a slight delay before you get it back. But that if the ACK hasn't come in, we will show a throbber, because it means the message hasn't reached the server. Whereas receipts, we will always request, but we'll only show the positive. So we will only show a receipt when one comes in. We won't show the lack of a receipt, which isn't what we do at the moment.
I think that makes sense. So there are two things here. What we just went through the exercise, we updated the internal data structures of the client. Then there's a separate, I think, should be separate logic for how rendering should happen based on that. What the potential recommended rendering is of that internal state. The internal state allows for this kind of rendering. We could do it either way. We could highlight receipts, we could not highlight receipts, including special things for unmatched receipts. If we get a receipt for something that doesn't even exist, what do we do? That is the rendering logic, and the rendering logic is really interesting because it depends on what kind of UI you are operating with. If the XMPP client is white spaced, that's different from the XMPP client being visual, is different from a bot or something. The logic that we just defined works for all of those cases. Now we can talk about specific UI implementations, and what you said I agree with. As in, I think that's the logical way of implementing it.
Yeah.
If a receipt has not been received, we should probably not display that message, very similar to how Monk operates.
Incidentally, I think what happens if you receive a receipt for a message you don't have is a problem, is a historical problem that goes away when you implement an IAM client properly in the modern world.
Well, you have to assume that other
fetch it from
clients,
history and
you have to assume that other clients are correct as well, as in a client can
Yes.
have you a receipt for something that it never received.
Yes, but I mean, in the current world, or the world of yesterday, you would receive receipts for things you never sent from because you happen to be online with a different client.
Yeah.
Whereas in the current, I say current, I mean tomorrow's world, UK television at its best. In tomorrow's world, it's not an issue because you know what all your other clients sent historically and for the current sessions. So in that case, it really is just another client bug if they start sending you receipts for things that weren't sent.
You can still get receipts if a client is malicious and just sends you one. So the logic needs to account for that, though.
Yes, but you might have cared about trying to guess the right thing to do in the past. Now I think you simply say, bin it.
Which is what we did.
Yeah.
Which is essentially what we did.
Sorry, I missed out by going to kick people in the head, didn't I?
It won't really be shown in the UI, I don't think. Okay, so we did most of this. I think this is reasonable. There are no logical flaws and such in here. Everything seems pretty straightforward. Now my question was, does the current presence of the contract on the other side at all affect this flow? And I don't think it does.
It does not affect the flow. It does affect your inputs to it. You know, you're not going to send a receipt if the contact does not seem to have that capability, or you're not going to send a message correction if the contact doesn't seem to have that ability.
Mhm.
But once you decide to do it,
Yes.
yeah,
Everything remains the same.
Wait.
Yes, Kev.
You may well send receipt requests if the other client doesn't support it.
certainly.
Because the current other client doesn't support it, but the next one that comes online that's going to get all of this via MAM does.
Very well, yes, that is true.
But it makes the multi-device thing makes receipts slightly complicated.
So in that case, Kev, are you recommending that for one-to-one, like just pure messaging, any sort of disco check that you would make, we just assume that everything's going to work because the next client that comes online is going to do it right?
No, I was just pointing out that multi-client makes anything disco-based slightly hairy.
Yeah.
Fairly hairy.
And it all, including receipts.
Right.
Because with a receipt, now if the message is sent to your full JID, I'm a client, and if the message is sent to my full JID, it's obvious that I am the one that should be sending a message receipt, right? Because it was sent to me.
Yeah.
Right? What happens when it's sent to the bare JID and there's two clients online?
I think the logical thing would be for both clients to receive, to send back an acknowledgement for that.
I agree.
Well, they could,
Yes.
and that would certainly work. You could also say that if something Carbons-ish is going to mean that the clients know the other client has sent a receipt, that by putting a small random delay before you send receipts, most of the time you're only going to send one,
Which
may or may not be worthwhile.
Right, this turns into a chicken and egg. Does one client delay longer than the other? Is it random? What if they delay?
As I said, if you have a small internal random timer before you send your receipts, then quite a lot of the time you only send one. I'm not entirely sure it's worthwhile.
I don't think so, because it makes the problem less likely to happen, but it doesn't actually.
It's not a
fix it.
fix, it's just passing over it.
Yeah.
Right.
Where-
What was my other point that was going to follow on from that? Oh, I don't know. It's too late on a Friday night. As you were.
So we were talking about presence.
Right.
I think that in terms of how most clients are implemented, presence are also events that are added to the log.
Okay,
As in most clients like to display when a user went offline and online, or at least the information should be available in the log, even if it's.
I think it's bad that clients do that.
Is it though? So that affects many things. If you're going through and looking at history, when we get into interesting things like file transfers, other things like that, are those affected by presence, or is presence just not something to worry about?
Well, for file transfers,
As in basically, is there like, so presence, the main reason clients add that is it's kind of sessionization. Okay, a session happened from here to here. It's kind of implicit sessionization. Hey, the party on the other side disconnected, and other things like that. Is that kind of information useful for a client from a historical perspective?
I don't think it is. I think the clients should remain completely dumb to that and should just, presence is purely a way to show a pretty green icon or something.
Yep.
And as far as they're concerned, if you hit, I don't know, send a file, even though your client appears to be offline, you should just try it. And if you get an error back, they're offline.
I agree with that. That's the same decision we were
The server on the other
making
hand might,
on the mixed side.
the server on the other hand might try to do some logic or
might raise a
decide
push
if they're-
notification.
right, do a push notification.
I think there's a big problem here, which is that for most things, we now have reasonable stories about how we deal with multiple clients and deal with everything in the same sort of way as every modern IAM system does, between MAM and MIX and carbons and what have you. But file transfer, the way we do it, is completely incompatible
Yes.
with the modern world. Which is, so this is, the modern world is why I say I think that clients should stop showing has come online, has gone offline and things. In the old world, it was useful for the clients to show that because you knew that stuff might go missing. And especially in MUX, showing who was in and out of it was important because anybody who wasn't in the MUX was probably never going to get the message. But we have history now. So you kind of assume your messages are going to get to the person. And indeed, them being offline, they may well even be getting Apple push notifications or Google Cloud messages, whatever they are.
Right.
By the fact they're offline. So I think users are always reachable in the new world, whether they have a client that's actively connected or not, or actively connected or not. But file transfer completely breaks down. Almost all the work we've done with file transfer doesn't work for a modern client.
So file transfers are intrinsically tied to the currently live sessions, the currently live resources, almost by
the upload
in their current form. So what we were discussing previously was a file hosting type service, and we were talking about stickers and emojis, but generally that is what would be required in the new world, as you said, when it comes to file transfers. As opposed to transferring files between clients, you would put a file somewhere and share a link to it. Okay.
Yes, I mean you could use one of our existing file transfer mechanisms to get it to your server.
Yeah, as the transfer.
From your server.
I mean, in the end, you're still doing peer-to-peer. It's just between a client and a server, not client to client.
Yes. So the
So
Jingle
go
stream becomes an XMPP stream, the same way we did an XMPP stream between a client and a server.
Yeah.
The Jingle streams becomes the same as opposed to true peer-to-peer. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. As in, you could just send a reference that is a reference to a resource that is managed by a client that may become unavailable, or managed by a server, which can also technically become unavailable, right? As opposed to sending a file itself.
Yeah, we've had several ways of doing that. So new file servers would be one way. There was a thing that I don't remember who ended up writing, a or Peter or Theo, of doing like publishing available Jingle sessions where you could have a service saying,
Do the live stream, but for the most part, people don't. And Jingle isn't prepared to do that.
no, in Jingle you have to have the two things online. You can hack it by assuming that one of them, as a server, is for the most part always going to be online.
Yes.
But yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And maybe some file transfer is like that. There is certainly some file transfer, as you mentioned, stickers and sort of inline image stuff that is not like that, where you expect it to be on all of your clients because it's part of the chat. But there may also be, I don't know, is it in the same way as video you kind of only expect to have on your current thing because it's transient? Perhaps sometimes you really do expect files just to come to where you are and grab them once. If you're transferring some large thing.
Right.
I mean, for Mix, I'm imagining you put all this stuff on the server and it just becomes part of the ongoing conversation via references.
Yep.
I do keep getting tempted in my darker moments to say, let's do away with one-to-one chat altogether, and every chat should be a mix.
See, that's essentially what I said at the last summit.
Yep.
In that you could totally implement all of XMPP, including PubSub and such, on top of Mix.
You do kind of have a recursion problem there, implementing PubSub on top of Mix, on top of PubSub.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we're missing, we need jumps, and then we'll have during completeness in PubSub. We're missing, so.
Let's see, you've got forwarding, you've got...
You have almost everything. I think you almost even have loops as well.
Yeah. Okay.
You actually... Correction, you do?
PubSub queuing allowed that. I think PubSub queuing allowed that. I was looking at that. I'm not 100% sure, but something definitely allowed that. Just conditional, we're missing.
Things we discussed at the summit. Can we make PubSub during complete? I feel this is a worthwhile way to spend 10 o'clock on a Friday evening.
Yeah, but then you just compile the PubSub.
Just-in-time PubSub.
Yes. It can be distributed, distributed software for the first time. So I think it does make a ton of sense, as in I was considering potentially a Roasty plugin or something that exposes man that is normal messages through the Mix protocol, because I don't see why not.
Sorry, I missed that because I was trying to read out what was happening in the Mac. It turns out I can't listen and read at the same time.
I was saying that at the last summit, what I was essentially thinking when it came to Mix was that the normal one-on-one chatting could, by a server like Roasty given a plugin, be exposed as Mix as well, so that legacy clients still see everything as a normal chat, but a Mix-enabled client that is okay with it can view that as a Mix chat as well. As in, it's fully translatable in both directions. For the most part, there are some quirky areas, but for the most part, you could pull that off.
But so fully for the most part.
As in, you could write a client with that fairly simply that only knows about Mix and knows about nothing else, and which would be able to very easily interoperate with any other client, whether Mix enabled or not.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
What was that?
I think you're probably right.
Yes. Probably. Which would be pretty neat, as in if we really want to go to the simplest possible code for clients, that is what we would need to do.
One of implementing PubSub in general in its current form is the simplest possible code for clients, though.
Oh, you're not implementing a PubSub service, it's just extracting an event from a message. and sending an IQ to publish. So that's
It is pretty simple. Like it's one piece of code. Yeah, from a client side, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. Though that also not from a client side, from just a protocol side though, since you are sending an IQ to publish, you
that does
basically
get
double your
wrapped.
traffic, and then you have receipts on top of your receipts. which
But
is
it's a
good.
huge simplification compared to
Yeah.
the current logic.
So, question: is it actually worth us pursuing this chain of thought?
I would say so, as in it solves so many problems when it comes to things like receipts, other things and so on, because you basically have a message log that you can sync, that you can publish to, and that's the only model that a client needs to worry about for everything.
Why was that an IQ? Was that just to ensure the publish succeeded?
so you know, like IQs give you a response.
Yeah.
So you know if it created a new node, if it created and assigned an item ID,
Right.
you would know that.
That's the only part that would make me nervous about this world, because now we've added all this extra traffic, hacking everything, hacking the
Well-
being an IQ response.
Well, we
As
could
well
change
as
the
potential-
protocol to simplify that.
Yeah.
But the logical model is really simple.
It kind of, the idea of doing it via a plugin in your server,
Yes.
kind of only half flies.
Kind of what?
Only half flies. Because for a real mix, there is a mix service, just the one,
Yes.
that owns the mix, or the channel, or whatever it is we decided we were going to call it.
Right.
And that's fine, because you're going to store things in that channel. You're going to upload stickers to that channel. You're going to reference things by URI in that channel. If you have your server doing magic translation, both servers doing magic translation to make it look like mixes, suddenly things like URIs to parts of that conversation become really tricky, because you've got two entities that are both controlling the conversation. So if we were to go to everything is a mix, I think we would genuinely have to go to everything is a real mix and has an address, and
Right.
not try and fuzz it at each end of the server.
So that is appealing, as in essentially XMPP 2.0. So one nice thing about Mix, and I'm trying to recall because this was quite some time back, I think that the protocol fully allowed having proxies, as in server A could basically fully 100% proxy server B without the client knowing, potentially caching things and so on its side. I'm trying to recall, but back when we were talking about it last time, I think that it wasn't that hard. I mean, there were definitely problems to be solved and edge cases to be considered, but most of it fell into logical places.
It can only be proxied with agreement.
Yes, yes. And when I was saying that the server can simulate a mixed environment, basically on top of normal chat, it is doable if the server only does it on the C2S side and not on the S2S side, as in retains the old format on the S2S side unless the server on the other side supports mix. So the client is simple, servers are complicated. Not too complicated, because mix is actually a pretty simple model. Other models very easily layer on top of it. But from a client's perspective, things would be just pure mix.
Well,
As in client code, which is something you just send a normal message out.
well, for messages possibly, but for presence, you kind of want to keep the roster in the presence model, don't you?
You do, but if you did what many servers have started to do, which is keep a presence cache, that kind of solves itself, and mix pretty much requires that. Further thinking required, but I think it's worthwhile. Like if it could be pulled off, it would be a pretty huge deal.
I don't know if what mix requires is a presence cache.
Well, something equivalent, as in you need the ability to query for online and offline state, As in mix has basically a lot of messages and it has a flag essentially, true or false, online or offline, or essentially a present stanza.
Well, it has a node. It has a pub/sub node that contains the current presence of every full JID, every proxy full JID that is in the room. Yes.
Which is in the room, and so it essentially needs that. Now that basically is a presence cache. Like a simple way of implementing it is a presence cache on top of your roster, as well as any other party that you shared presence with, if you were trying to present the world as a mixed world to the client, regardless of what happens on the other side. But I don't see any reason why you couldn't present it as a mixed world to the client.
Yeah, I think this is too radical for me to actually think through at the moment.
Okay, I should feel proud of that, I suppose.
I don't think being smarter than Kev is really something to be proud of.
Yeah, it appealed to me that if the client had a piece of code which was mixed handling logic, it could basically get everything else, including normal chat, including muck, including other stuff that we have been talking about from a protocol perspective. With just that one reusable piece of code, you wouldn't need to implement logic differently for how it does muck, to how it does one-on-one chat, to how it does anything else.
It is vaguely appealing, isn't it?
And you could implement rosters and such on top of Mix as well. Like anything which is a list that you listen to, or you add remove from, basically turns into just one Mix building block.
Well, yes, because that's pub/sub, and pub/sub
Yes.
is building block for Mix.
Other than during completeness, you have pretty much everything.
Well, that's what we're working on tomorrow.
Oh.
Please, no sharing completeness.
I mean, we have Node as code, but we never fully really specified any implementation pieces of it.
Oh, yeah. That's what we
Wasn't
don't
that
do.
the point that you didn't specify node as code?
See, if we did include XSLT, we would get Turing completeness. Specify like an XSL.
Wait.
transform.
pub/sub does specify
Does it?
where to get an XSL file to apply to payloads. So there you go.
There we go.
okay.
There we go.
That's
Turing completeness. There we go. Done. That's all we were missing.
Alternatively, we could go with the earlier suggestion of doing the whole, rewrite XMPP and JSON, and then all the web clients will just eval JSON, and then it'll be Turing complete. So you can just
Let's not go
JavaScript
there.
it. Nothing could possibly go wrong.
Okay, so we were talking about something. I forgot where it
So
started from.
we finished our model for how to do messages.
Mhm.
They're asking if there's anything extra that we need to do related to presence.
So I think the only thing to do with presence, what we're saying is the client keeps a set of flags or present stanzas for entities that it knows about. Right? And it just keeps a cache. This is a set mapping from JIT to stanza, and it just adds to it.
Right.
It typically doesn't need historical information.
So we are talking about presence, and we are trying to get some implementation model stuff, make things easier for developers. There is one item that is always very tricky. I don't know if it's written up somewhere, which is, sorry?
Chat binding?
Still didn't catch that.
Still
Chat binding.
chat binding.
Yes.
Oh,
When you start receiving stanzas from a full JID, you're meant to bind to that full JID and send your future stanzas to that full JID.
we haven't gotten there yet. The one I was thinking of is with presence, you've got the one little status icon beside it. You've got 10 different resources with 10 different statuses.
Mhm.
Which one icon do you display beside that person?
Well, Swift has already gone the way of binning most of the statuses, or half of them, and merging them together. Because we thought the difference between not here and not here, really, was sufficiently subtle to be of no use to users. And similarly, the difference between I'm available to chat and I'm available to chat, please chat with me, was sufficiently subtle to be of little use to users. And I think, in essence, you just do that so that if you have any online state, which is FFC and available, then you show a green icon.
Yes.
If there are any DNDs, then you show a DND. And if all that's there is away, that you show away. You show orange or whatever.
Yeah. I just don't think we've had that written explicitly up anywhere yet, so that'd be a good thing.
Yep, so basically you're supposed to show red, orange, green, yellow.
Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, yes.
And then the one presence status, like status message that you show, which one is that? The most
the
recent. Sorry?
Oh, the message. Oh, well, that gets fun, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you have to select based on the color you're showing. From that set, pick the highest priority one or the most recent one or something like that.
Well, I think potentially what we want to do is reconsider the idea of having client-specific status messages.
I mean,
I think
technically, the
that's
ideal would be a pep. But
Yes.
There we go.
Yes. Technically, the idea would be a pep note thing. It's all.
That's always pep.
Yeah.
That's just the stock answer. But that's not what we have.
Well,
So-
it can be what? Well, having only a single status message can be what we say is the sensible thing to do if we want to. We're not going to rip it out to the protocol, but if we're in the middle of writing suggestions for implementers of how to write a decent client, then we could say, if one of your other clients changes their status message, get rid of yours. So that only one of your clients has a published status message at one time or something like that.
Okay.
Because, as you say, when you try to render this in a client, for any sane situation that I can immediately think of, and I accept there are things I can't immediately think of, you're going to want to just show one. Something exciting is happening outside that window, isn't it? I don't know what it is, but it looks exciting.
I'm not actually sure either, but how's it replaying the thing from last night? All hands.
Is that looks right? I don't know what's.
It's not on my. Okay.
So what you just said, Kev, it kind of makes sense. If the clients were not doing that, if you were doing that on their behalf, you would just pick the most recent one.
Yeah.
Of the green group and so on.
Well, or just the most recent one in general.
So if my phone goes away but my desktop is still online, we still want to pick my desktops.
Yes, but your phone shouldn't be changing its status message just because it's gone to away.
I think phones, so existing clients do that, as in I know that clients change to things like some idle status or something like that. So existing clients do that, which is why we'll need to take it
But
into account.
there's a right way of doing idle as well, which I think Toby spec'd up, didn't he?
Yeah,
Which is
it's 3 or 319.
But existing clients.
It's existing clients, yes.
Well, Swift does it,
Yeah, Swift does do it.
and it's actually jolly nice.
And then there's a nice Crispy plugin that will
Yes.
inject that. So if you write a new client, that's the only thing you ever have to care about.
To some extent, I know
Yeah.
that's not to all extents, but to some extent, if we want to make significant improvements to XMPP, we're going to have to accept that old clients doing stupid things aren't going to play nicely.
So basically, in that case, we just use Mix for all new clients, and that's it, right?
And use Hassel, and there's no problem.
there's nothing else left in the protocol. Make sense, Hassel, and you're done.
What I'm saying at least half makes sense, doesn't it? I mean,
Yes.
But which half?
I mean, if we realistically, if we want XMPP to be a sensible alternative to name any modern messenger, then there is going to be a bootstrap for the clients and the servers before it gets to that stage. And running Psi 0.84 is not going to play nicely in that world. You don't want to break based on what you receive from it, but if you think of things, I'm thinking partly because of my current bias, but I'm thinking of things where you deploy a complete system and you can deploy the clients of your choice on whatever platform and the server, and you can actually deploy entirely modern systems. Then getting really nice experiences in that case seems really good. And I realize it's hard then to get the internet to catch up. But
well, the nice thing about the mixed world is that it's not that hard to catch up. And I don't think that, well, given effort on the server side, compatibility can be ensured. As in, you can write bridges between mix and non-mix. At least I haven't thought of much that doesn't allow for that. So, and presence in that case, you would have just one status. Given mix, what logic you choose to pick that status from multiple statuses from the old world is something that we can just pick. And I don't think there are wrong answers there. You could pick the most recent one, the most recent green one, or something like that. But something could be done. The fact that there should be just one status, I think everything is going towards that. And I don't see why resources couldn't have a status, just that it shouldn't necessarily be in the UI and such.
The big issue with the statuses to me, and the reason I think that's right, really one status is all you need, is from a user perspective, all you care about is, can your friend talk or not? You probably don't care about, are they on their phone and their phone's away, or, that's all you care about. So and if you are doing all of them, so you have your phone goes away, the user doesn't care about that. But meanwhile, and the server might, but meanwhile that has to be broadcast to everybody else that presence changed, which is a huge amount of extra traffic in large groups. So I feel like it's kind of there's no reason to have it, and it's potentially a negative.
So I think you're right. I think you're right within the context of IM. And if we were only building IM systems, that binning quite a lot of what we have would be a sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
But that also lots of these things that seem more powerful than we need and more fiddly than we need for IM do actually turn out to be quite useful when you come to do other things. I'm not convinced that status message per resource is actually one of them, but lots of other things are, like full GUID addressing and per client disco and et cetera, that to some extent you don't care about in IM because you only think of the endpoint as a user. When you start thinking about them as set-top boxes or whatever, it starts being more interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think anything is that a status as in if you needed to know that someone is on their phone versus their tablet versus desktop, you just go for that. You don't really need the textual, non-machine readable status message for that. And if you didn't need to include something that was human readable a message and such, you can still use Disco for that by using a data form, which we don't like, but still lists.
Right.
Okay. So just for the record, currently in my modern XMPP guidelines, I've got especially a recommendation that what a lot of clients do today is they have built-in stupid status messages saying basically repeating what the show element is. So when they're when they're do not disturb, they'll be like do not disturb in the status element. So that's an absolute must not. I've got that actually setting a status message at all is an optional feature in the UI, and displaying them is a must at the moment. But I'm willing to be persuaded on that. The idea being that if someone goes to the extent of setting a message, then it's worth displaying it in your context.
Well, it's worth it for them, certainly. Whether it's worth it for me seeing it is another matter. I'm trying to think about it now, and I'm trying to think of a single situation in which I actually get value of a status message that wouldn't be better served by something else. So there are some status messages that I find useful, but they're almost always ones that people at ISO set to say working from home.
Yeah,
which isn't really a status message, it's a geolock.
That's the point of this, in that stupid status messages should go away and they should be used for only useful information. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for.
Well, I think must is wrong for
I agree with that. It should be a should.
anything UI-ish, but I think saying, yeah, I feel recommended rather than should, despite them being equivalent, is the right thing. But yeah, I can see the argument that if somebody goes to the effort of setting one, then they probably want it shown. But equally, if I want a client that's fairly bare bones and just shows the person exists, the person doesn't exist, then it doesn't seem like it should be non-compliant.
The status message, by the way, does not have to be shown in the contact list. It can be like you open a message window and it could be in the header of the message window or whatever.
So Matt, are you saying that it must be shown?
Yes. The information is there, it must be
So
shown.
I disagree with that because XHTML IAM information is present, and I would rather have clients that don't display that be allowed.
XMPP
If information is present,
Oh,
I'm perfectly fine with the client not displaying information that is present. Because would you argue that it must display?
yeah, but no, that's a different case. That's a message, and XHTML IAM already has plain text format. This is the case of I want to tell my contacts that I am, whatever, working from home, and I can't rely on their client to show that information to them.
Well, in the new world, though, you would set that on your account, not on a given resource.
The new world isn't here yet. I'm talking about.
Well, you write a first, you plug in, and it will be here.
It's not. So
Aren't you writing guidelines for what the new world should be?
no, that's not what I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make guidelines for making today's world a nicer place to live in, rather than, oh, well, let's create this protocol, let's make all clients change to using technical status messages. I'm not going down that route.
I mean, realistically,
The XMPP can define those protocols now, and tomorrow's world can use them, but I'm not trying to.
Well, I do think that the current sort of protocols are, the implementation is messy and different across all clients.
Yeah, and I'm trying to make the implementation and the user interface of all those protocols more coherent. But I'm not trying to define the protocols if it can be helped. And I think we've got a lot to play with already out there and even implemented. It's just a lot of it is handled in a weird way and inconsistently between clients.
So here's the thing. I would say that a lot of the new stuff that we're talking about, and Carbon, SNAP, and so on, are basically new. Implementations are, for the most part, inconsistent of the bugs and such, and they're fairly green. They're fairly new implementations. And a lot of the different pieces that we have try to do the same thing in a specialized way, solving one problem here, one problem over there, with completely different building blocks that are almost the same. So, which all boils down into mix in my mind, right? So we should pick one and standardize it across the board, as opposed to continuing on forever with 5 different versions of, hey, here's a list of things, And this is the very special way you sync them.
Again, that's a protocol consideration. From a protocol perspective, yes, probably sounds nice.
Yes.
Are you including mixed for one-to-one chats?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
I have a
and
question.
because this all started with, hey, it's kind of really painful to start as a developer when it comes to XMPP. Consistent documentation for existing protocols, if it's as thick as the book, which it would need to be, given the complexity of current protocol, very interesting ways that things like carbon swam and so on interact with, unless you're essentially writing out pseudocode for them, developers would have a pretty hard time, in my mind, right? No matter how explicitly you specify.
Yeah.
So should we or should we not think about what would be the alternative approach? And I think it's worth thinking, even if we decided to not go down the mixed route, it's worth evaluating. Because it seems really straightforward, it seems really simple. So basically, I'm less conservative.
Well, I would say an approach to getting to that state would be, first of all, get mixed working for multi-party conversations, and then
I think that's sensible.
Yeah, I think so. From an implementation perspective, definitely. From a
I have a question.
perspective, well, the thing that we can kind of consider as we're going through the protocol definition is making sure that these use cases are just considered, so we don't shut the door to anything. And at this time, mix seems suitably generic that it can serve most use cases that we have. Like anything we have, which is a list of elements, and you need to subscribe to updates in history for it, mix basically solves.
Did you folks decide you were going to be finishing 20 minutes ago?
yeah.
Yes.
I have, because it's sort of 2 hours since I finished training, and I really, really want to go have a shower and go to bed.
Yes, they wanted to stop at 4 and it's now 4:20.
Okay.
So,
Good discussion.
yes.
Are you guys going to be putting this stream up again tomorrow?
We have the room tomorrow.
We have this, yeah, as long as we want tomorrow. I'll weekend everyone.
So what time are you starting in Zulu?
I think we said by 8 CDS, CDT, so yeah, 1300 UTC.
So which time UTC?
1300.
Thank you. I don't know if I'll be here or not, but I will possibly try.
Cool.
But I'm going to vanish and go and get out of incredibly sweaty clothes. Thank you. Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, I am ending audio recording now.
As am I. That's enough.